Welcome, members and guests. Good morning. Today is Wednesday, April 14th, 2021. I hereby call the Subcommittee on Elections and Campaign Finance to order. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Representative Holsclaw? Representative Love? Here. Representative Manis? Representative Shaw? Here. Representative Williams? Representative Wright? Here. Chairman Crawford? Present. Chairman Rudd?
Here.
Chairman Rudd, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any personal orders before we begin? This is, of course, the final meeting this year, as of right now, of our committee. And we've had a lot of changes, so I asked both the research and my secretary and legal to remind me to stay on track because we've had a lot of changes at the last minute. Chairman Whitson has graciously, since his bill will take up some time, he's graciously offered to roll his to the bottom of the calendar so we can take up other bills quickly, and I want to appreciate him for that. First up, we have item number 2, HB 1158 by Representative Stewart, and motion and a second. That bill, he has asked that be, let's see, this particular one, that one, he's asked for it to be rolled, but it has to be, we can't, it's a third calendar, so it's got to go to the clerk's desk. A special calendar, excuse me, before we can do that. So moved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. I like the gavel today. Let's see. That is 1158 has been moved to special calendar. Item number 3, HB 1429 by Representative Miller. Second. We have a motion and a second. And he has asked that bill be rolled to the second calendar of 2022. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll roll that to this calendar of 2022, second calendar. He has also asked on HB 1447, Representative Miller has asked that to be also rolled to the second calendar of 2022. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we will roll that 1447 to the second calendar of 2022. Next up is item 5, HB 1280 by Representative Leatherwood. And let it be shown that Representative Manis is in the building. Of today? Okay. Representative Leatherwood's asked that to be rolled to the end of today's calendar. Road to the hill of today's calendar. HB 0805 by Representative Powell has taken that off notice. Item number 7, HB 0937 by Representative Freeman, and he is here. Hello. I have a motion and a second on the bill. You have a motion and a second on your bill?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't expecting it to be this quick. I appreciate you rolling everybody in front of me so you can hear my bill. So we're all aware of the issues with election security right now. We hear it every day. I'm sure you hear it as much from your constituents as I do. And this has been going on for, predates me, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 years, to the point that in 2018 or 2017, this body requested a TASER study. That TASER study came back, and I can share it with anybody that cares to see it. But it came back and recommended several things, and one of them was that we should have paper ballots in Tennessee. Right now, Tennessee is only one of the 12 states that doesn't require electronic voting machines to print out paper ballots. We don't specify what that would look like in my bill. This is agnostic to the provider of the voting machine. It simply requires that what we have is that we have a printed ballot that is user verifiable. I'm going to read the language of the bill because I think there's been some confusion over this bill and a federal bill, which is H.R. 1. And in my bill, it calls out a voter verifiable paper audit trail as meaning a paper ballot marked by hand or marked by a device that is made available for inspection and verification by the voter at the polling location, or a record of a contemporaneously printed at the time that the voter is cast ballot using a direct recording electronic system that is made available for inspection and verification by the voter at the polling location. With that, I stand ready to answer any questions.
Chairman Crawford, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one, not had a chance to go through every single thing on this, but my question to you, Rep. Freeman, would be, do they not have the ability that they can go ahead and do this at this point? Why are we having to pass something? Will this mandate they have to do it, or will it still be permissive that they can do it? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you. So what this does is it requires the state coordinator of elections to provide the assistance and then allocate the funds for purchasing or leasing the system. So as these systems come offline, it would require them to replace them with a paper trail voting system.
Chairman Crawford.
Follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the locals be responsible for funding that at that time in the replacement of that machine?
They would.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But there's also federal money available for yeah.
Chairman Williams.
Would your bill as amended require any other way of scanning documents that's atypical from right now? Like, is there a, currently we in Tennessee, we don't have a problem with elections. We simply don't. Everything's managed well from Secretary of State. We don't have any issues. I guess if we're not having issues, I guess what solution or is this bill seek to, or problem does this bill seek to fix? I guess I'm a little bit concerned because
Sure.
not necessarily with you or your bill, but if there's not a problem, why are we trying to fix it, and why are we mandating that our local governments have to foot the bill for it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. This bill contemplates the idea of the printed verified paper trail. So how that gets entered, there are numerous ways. We could come up with another 10 different ways between now and the time that we have a next election. All this does is verify, make sure that we have a paper trail. That's number one. Number two, the idea of having that paper trail falls in line with best practices from both our Tasser study that this body requested, and the result that came out of that was that we need to have a verified paper trail, and also the Department of Homeland Security has called out that if you don't have a paper trail, that you are at risk of something happening. And while I agree, today we do a great job, what this does is it sets best practices in place for people as they are going to replace their machines moving forward, to make sure that those best practices are taken into account, and that we can continue to say, because that's what I want, for us to be able to continue to say that we have safe, secure elections, and we're doing it the best way that we can.
Thank you. One more. Representative Love's next on the list.
Oh, Chairman.
Oh, he is. He's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
I have never been confused with such a handsome representative from Nashville before. Representative Love. I think he called. I thought he called me. I thought he called me Representative Love for a minute. But anyways,
You said I was confusing.
yeah, me too. Super confused. But now I'm back on the reservation. I have the reason why I'm a little bit concerned about this bill is I have a fantastic chairman of the election commission in my community. I mean, they do a fantastic job on both sides of the aisle. All the staff, great folks. able to go in there and have a paper trail, know exactly what's going on. And in this instance, I guess I'm just a little bit nervous that there might be an unintended consequences that you or I might not know. And I appreciate the sponsor, and we got to talk a little bit about it 10 minutes ago for a little bit of time. But I just am a little bit concerned about it right now, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And listen, I get that. Change is scary sometimes. And if you already have a paper trail, does nothing to anything that you're doing right now. So, you know, I don't, yeah, it would not change anything that you're doing currently.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the other Representative Love on the side over there. Good to see you this morning. Representative Freeman, thank you for bringing this legislation. And I do agree that we do have good, safe elections, but I appreciate your proactive approach, because the truth of the matter is we don't know who will be sitting here 4 years from now. We don't know who may be running our election commissions 4 years from now. And I'm always grateful when people bring legislation that will ensure that the direction that we are going in is able to be sustained. And so I appreciate this piece of legislation, and I applaud your effort to make sure that when people leave, that they have some assurance that their vote has been cast the way they want to. So thank you for that.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you for those comments. Again, it's a very simple bill. It follows the recommendations of the bipartisan TASER study that this body put forth that recommended that we have voter verified paper trail. It follows the recommendations of the Department of Homeland Security, and it puts Tennessee in line with other states as a best practice in how elections should take place.
If not, next is Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can identify with the statement that the current situation predates us, having been here like the 3 years. But my understanding of what's taken place is that we, at state level, look after making sure that the local folk do a good job. And as a result of us making sure they do a good job, as you referenced, there was a study. It came out with the best practices. And I can say in the last election, my home county, Knox County, moved to a machinery setup that is, and let me describe it, you mark the paper ballot and the paper ballot is scanned. I also know that there are other systems out there wherein you, I think, punch the buttons on the electronic machinery, and then it prints out a paper trail, which I guess you can, now see, I don't know the rest of this. I guess you can stand there and identify that your paper trail matches what you pressed as buttons. And getting to where this bill would have us be, I then sat beside my chairman, it's going to cost some money. So let me go back to where I started. The study was conducted and the local authorities are working to get to best practice, and I think that I'll have to leave it at that, and as then that works out, I can't support the bill. But I thank you for presenting it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Freeman.
So the two examples that you called out are both specifically in the bill, specifically. And while I appreciate the idea of leaving it to local control, we tell them every day what to do. We tell them through our state government how elections need to take place. And if we as a body are going to take state resources to perform a TASER study, and the last page of this TASER study, I'm going to read it just so that we're all clear. include strong recommendations for VPAT devices. And so, again, this is not requiring them to buy a specific machine. It's not calling out a brand. It's not calling out the process in which they do it. It's just requiring us to go back home to our constituents and be able to look them in the eye and say, we've done our part to make sure that our elections are secure. And I hope that you can change your mind and support this. And on the fiscal note, let us debate that in finance. Let us debate the merits of elections in the election committee right now. And if you can honestly tell me that you don't believe that a voter verified paper trail is the best practice for voter security and election security, then I'll roll this to next year and I'll spend the rest of the summer talking to you.
Not Representative Manis, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Freeman. Just kind of piggyback on
Need to turn your mic on.
Mike's on.
I certainly think that voter verified paper trail is the best way to go, but my question is more about the timing, and I'm not sure what this is, but if the federal HR 1 resolution is still being decided on, why should we not wait on that? And I certainly appreciate the TASER study, but should we not wait on that until we move forward? Like Vice Chair Wright said, in Knox County, we have upgraded. I don't know if it would be to the standard where we need, but that is my concern. Should we not wait for the federal study before we move forward at the state level? And I guess I'm just a little confused on that.
Representative Freeman.
Yeah, short answer is no. I have no idea what the federal government's going to do. I have no confidence that HR 1 is going to pass. I have no confidence that even if it does pass, that the state of Tennessee doesn't join a lawsuit to say that the federal government can't tell us how to run our elections. And so, to me, it's incumbent upon us to do what we think is right. If HR 1 conflicts with it, then we can do it at that point. But this bill is a good bill, and it puts best practices forward. And I mean, they could pass any bill. They could make it that you can vote by carrier pigeon, and this bill does not contemplate that. So there are so many variables that I can't even begin to understand, and HR 1 is completely irrelevant to this legislation.
Thank you.
Representative Hostclaw, Chairman Hostclaw, excuse me.
Thank you, Chairman. What percentage of the counties have this paper trail today?
Great question. So there are 14 as of today that have these machines, and that number changes regularly. I don't have the updated numbers in front of me, but
Thank you.
yeah.
All right, Representative Crawford, Chairman, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, I don't know what you got against the Tennessee Bluebird, and you said carrier pigeon there. I'm kind of a little offended there, but no, in all seriousness, the 1.5 million I see that's on the fiscal note. Can you tell me, because I serve on Finance, Ways and Means, so that's why I'm kind of looking at it not only from debating the election side, but the finance side. Why do we have that for sequential years? Why is that going to be a reoccurring cost?
I don't actually know how they come up with some of these numbers. To be totally honest with you, the main point for me is that as these machines begin to get replaced, they will be forced to buy something that has a voter verified paper trail. If you read in the fiscal note, it also goes back to a 2018 survey, which then references the TASER. My belief is that once we really dig into this, that number will be significantly less because, for example, Knox County is not on the list of having a voter verified paper trail right now. And these are best practices that I would wager every single election commissioner, as they're buying a new machine, is including this in their bids, in their requirements for the bids.
Point of order, one correction, the department, they are now, there's 28 counties that have a paper backup now. All right, excuse me. Was it anyone want to follow up?
Yes.
Chairman Crawford.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess that's kind of what I was thinking, and I didn't know if there was a deeper explanation that I was missing. But I mean, I would think that once the machines are allocated by our locals, that number would not be reoccurring once the expense was made. But, so I can't figure out why this is reoccurring cost. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Freeman.
I can control the language within my bill. Unfortunately, I can't control the fiscal note. So,
Chairman Williams. Is there any objection? We have a question on the bill. Saying no objection, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? No.
sounded close.
No. Rule chairless fails for lack of yeas. And let's see, I believe we are now at the heel of the calendar. And we got to take Leatherwood because he had HB number 5, HB 1280 by Representative Leatherwood. Are you prepared? Taking him out of order. Any objections? Seeing none. The floor is yours. There were motion, second on the bill. Second on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
I believe you have an amendment too.
yes, there
What's
is
your
an
tracking
amendment,
number?
7040.
All right, does that make the bill?
Yes, sir.
Here a motion and a second on the bill. Motion. Second on the bill. Excuse me, on the amendment, 7040. Proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This bill would end up saving our two most indebted counties over $1.4 million in the upcoming budget year, as well as every non-presidential election cycle thereafter. So the fiscal note is a very positive $1,427,000. Also, it can bring consistency and reduce voter confusion in our largest high debt areas that have a very high number of positions on the ballot. In Shelby County, there's about 40 judicial positions alone. In Davidson County, there's about 30 judicial positions there. So that can create confusion. Again, the main impact of this bill, it'll result in more efficient, cost-effective government, again, in these large, high-debt counties, as well as more consistent, less confusing, daunting elections. And to throw out the information that's the basis of this, Davidson County's debt, I was a little surprised. I assumed Shelby County would be number one. But Davidson County has $3.6 billion in debt. Memphis City has $1.3 billion in debt. Shelby County has $995,000 million in debt. I know some members of this committee that were on another committee with me, we see that some of these entities are coming to legislature now looking for more ways to raise revenue, but I think we need to begin addressing the expenditure side of the equation. Again, this bill only impacts extremely high-debt counties with large numbers of positions on the ballots and will not impact any others. With that, I'll take any questions.
We have any questions on the amendment? If not, we need to attach the amendment.
No?
We do. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to make sure I'm clear about the intent of your legislation. This is to reduce the debt and the expenses of these two counties?
Reduce the expenses and hopefully reduce the debt as well. Of course, at this time, many of these entities can still spend more money than they take in, but saving money is one important side of the equation. I should also throw out, it's my understanding the comptroller is looking at Davidson County now and ways to try and address this debt issue.
Okay. I'm grateful for my colleagues from other counties' interest in Davidson County. I really do appreciate that. I'm always grateful for that when we talk about a myriad of issues, education, elections. But I would hope that there'd be some consideration for the fact that I'm not sure that this is what Davidson County voters are really pushing for. I know they don't want to have more debt. I know they'd like to have more revenue and reduce debt. That certainly is the case. But my concern would be about reducing these listings of candidates on the ballot, and whether that's the best direction to take for reducing debt. If that indeed is the case, if the goal is to reduce the debt of these counties, that there may be some more creative ways for us to reduce some of the debt in Davidson County. I can't speak for Shelby, only for the county in which I was born and have lived in all my life. I'm familiar with the time even before we had the metropolitan form of government, before it was just Nashville and Davidson County, and then of course this merger. So I just want to raise that issue of concern for me as a lifelong resident of Davidson County. I've watched our investments, of course, in the infrastructure of the city and the many things we're trying to do. But I do appreciate you listening and hear me out on that piece.
Thank you. And while this legislation at this point would be limited to Shelby and Davidson, it does impact the whole state. Has a high potential of impacting the whole state. If any of these counties, or in the case of Memphis, defaults, it does fall on the entire state, the rest of the state, to step in there. And being from Davidson, it's similar to being from Shelby. I can't tell you how many times I've heard something similar to, oh, if that earthquake just moved y'all on over to Arkansas, we'd be. But so we can't just say, hey, it's Shelby, it's Davidson, because all our residents are citizens of Tennessee, and they will still need those basic services, fire, police, whatever. They will still need those services. So it does become a statewide responsibility and issue. Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, my colleague here is from Nashville, and I'm not from Shelby, but I'm 68 miles east of there, so I think I'm going to speak for Shelby. First of all, I kind of need you to understand the latter part of the amendment that makes the bill says remove Shelby County's ability to choose by 2/3 resolution to have nonpartisan elections, thus making it mandatory. I think I know what that means, but tell me in your own words exactly what does that mean?
Yeah, and that's interesting point and dovetails into other pertinent information that can be made. Again, both counties have a mix of partisan and nonpartisan, which can add to the confusion of voters. Davidson County has partisan judicial elections. Shelby County has nonpartisan judicial elections based on the section that you just read. If this legislation passes, then both counties would have nonpartisan judicial elections, and both counties would save that money on the May primary, and therefore that section of the code would not be needed. Shelby County has already implemented that, and again, does have the nonpartisan judicial elections now. And yes, you are very much in the neck of the woods of Shelby County, and I actually drive through your district regularly on the way to McNairy
Beautiful,
County.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, it is. God's country there. That's where my wife grew up.
Representative Shaw.
Well, thank you for those comments. I'm a sole believer when in a small area where I'm in a place called Bolivar, Tennessee. We've got 5, maybe 6, 7,000 people in the city, and I don't think any of our elections should be, partisan elections, because you divide the people, and whoever wins, it makes it harder for them to govern because the other half is mad because they didn't win. But in the case of Shelby County, that's a large population of people, and I don't know if we would not be crippling Shelby and Davison, for that matter, to put these restrictions on them in a case like this. I think I know what you're doing, and yeah, we all do need to save money. But in all due respect, being on this committee and being that close to them, I wouldn't want to face them to vote for this legislation. I would not. And to be honest, I cannot support this because, of course, I'm just one person on the committee, but because of where I'm located, I just could not support this right now. But thank you for bringing it. I appreciate it.
We're on the amendment. We have a question on the amendment. Is there any objections to calling the question on the amendment? Seeing none, we're now voting on amendment 7040. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. I'm going to say the ayes have it. Everybody needs to speak up. The amendment, we're on the amended bill. Hold it. We have Representative Williams, and that's right, not want to speak. Oh, just one moment. Representative Wright, you were on the list on the amendment. Do you still want to speak on the bill, the amended bill? No, go ahead. Okay, Chairman Williams, go ahead.
Thank you. Representative, I got to admit, when you first came to my office, you started talking about this bill, I thought, man, what in the world is this guy thinking about? But as I studied a little bit more, I think I better understand the purpose behind the bill. I think, obviously, in Putnam County, we have some elections that are partisan and some are not partisan, and so we found that even in our nonpartisan elections, that people are able to get along better. I will say, and their political views don't supersede those of their constituents' views. And so the more I read this, the more I thought, well, maybe this is not a bad idea. And particularly, you draw a lot of attention to the debt as it relates to these. And that debt really bodes in support of your bill, because what it proves is that the current practice isn't working. Of all the debt we have in the state, these two are encumbered with the largest debt. Matter of fact, there are 3 bills before finance to try to raise taxes in these communities because there's a need for additional revenue that's very difficult to find. And so I do think that having these elections that are nonpartisan would open the field of candidates such that it would allow for more creative thought, which it seems to me like, as it relates to fiscal stewardship, might be a better solution. But appreciate the bill, going to be supporting it today, and thank you for bringing it.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor. Since this is a debt reduction bill, when these cities reduce their debt by this amount, is there consideration that they'll be allowed to have these elections back like they did prior?
The lines in the legislation are based on the population and the debt, so there's always that opportunity for counties, local governments to move in or out based on their actions. Again, this would save money for them. Then they would have the choice of reducing their debt or spending twice as much money as saved. But that kind of goes to the other point. Sooner or later, if they don't address their issues, we or the comptroller will have to. But if it's important to them to move out of this, then reduce that liability on your citizens and the state. Move out.
And I appreciate that because as much as Nashville may have some debt issues, I think it's safe to also acknowledge the amount of revenue that is generated in Nashville for the state of Tennessee. We're all constituents, as you said, of the state. And I think it's, as much as we talk about the fact that if one were to go down, all the citizens would have to bear that load. But in equalness, we also need to talk about the fact that we all benefit from some of those things. And when we talk about athletic events and professional football teams and tourism and conventions, CMA comes here, brings revenue in, people spend money. I just don't want us to get to a place where we single out a situation and become so focused on helping Nashville reduce its debt that we just focusing on one issue. I certainly welcome all opportunities to support, again, the city of Nashville as is a part of the state of Tennessee to not have this heavy debt burden. There's a great conversation we can have about incentives that the city and the state give to corporations who move here, right? And maybe we need to have that conversation and maybe not attract so much business, right? And say, hold up on the business attraction so we can reduce this debt. If that, again, with this being a debt reduction bill, I just wanted to put that out there. And I'm certainly pro-business, but a lot of what we do involves giving tax abatements to business to locate and give them tax incentives to bring business, which all works together. And so I don't want us to focus so much on that. And certainly we don't want anyone's debt to get out of control, but I think it's important for us to talk about these measures. But I'm glad you did answer that if they do reduce their debt, they may be able to come out of this provision. So thank you.
Thank you. I have no one else on the list to speak. If there's no further discussion, do I have any objections to voting on the bill? Seeing none, all those in favor of the bill, HB 1280 as amended, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Hear the nays, carry the day, and chairman votes no. Let's see, next up is, on our regular calendar, is HB 1201 by Chairman Whitson. Here a second, I have first and second. And I believe you, let's see, you have an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
What's the tracking number you're amending?
Tracking number I have, Mr. Chairman, is 7049, makes the bill.
I had two. I had a 6652 and a 7049. That's the only one you're putting on, though, isn't it? Okay.
Yes.
Wanted to make sure. We have a motion and a second on the amendment and the bill, on the bill and, well, excuse me, on the amendment. Is there any objection to putting the amendment on the bill? It does make the bill, doesn't it?
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Seeing no objections, all those in favor of attaching 7049 to the bill, 1201, say aye. Opposed, nay. It is attached to the bill. Please tell us about your bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. And Mr. Chairman, thanks for letting me presenting from here. I just turned 67. This makes life much more easier for me. Thank you. For some of us, okay? First of all, thank you for allowing me to present this. I just want to say I've been buried in this TCA for the past couple of weeks, and I will never, ever say another lawyer joke as long as I live, okay? So I appreciate the complexity of this. First of all, this is a campaign finance reform and ethics reform bill. And this started years ago, not just recently. When I first got up here, one of the first bills I co-sponsored was to require campaign funds to be put in an FDIC account. And I could not believe we did not do that beforehand, all campaign funds. And so this is just kind of a continuation of that effort that started years ago. And there's several sections to this bill. In fact, there's over 30. And just real quick, summarize sections 1 through 5. This deals with the Tennessee Bureau of Ethics and Campaign Finance and the Registry of Election Finance and the Ethics Commission. And basically it calls for how they report their committee meetings for special meetings and their regular meetings and what amount of penalties that will be required to be discussed there. So again, it would require, and I'll just read this, no settlement in which the aggregate amount of assessed civil penalties exceeding $25,000 should be accepted by the registry unless the settlement proposal is considered at either a regular or special meeting called by the chair. The special meetings require 24-hour notice to be given to each member of the registry and each party seeking a settlement. Also, it calls for the executive director of the can settle cases up to this half of this amount of a fine, max to $12,500, that $25,000 amount. Next, sections 8 through 14 covers itemized contributions and expenditures, and this kind of dovetails with your earlier legislation, Mr. Chairman. And it deletes it establishes new reporting periods beginning on or after 1 January 2022. This deletes $100 and less exclusion for reporting and substituting instead the requirement to list all contributions received, including the full name, complete address, occupation, and employer of each person who contributed during the period in which the statement is submitted, and the amount contributed by the persons. And PACs are included in this requirement. It also adds the requirement to report in-kind contributions of any amount. This also removes the automatic audit for statements with 30% unitemized contributions and totals more than $5,000. Now, the $1,000 max under this legislation only applies to local candidates, not to state-level candidates. Section 15 through 19 covers the interim 10-day reporting period. What we'll do here is currently they are hand-delivered or mailed, overnight mail. We're adding electronic means to submit this report by close of business in each day. And it changes the amount required to be reported from $5,000 to $2,500. And this is the same as local elections. It adds expenditures to the reporting requirement as well as contributions and independent expenditures, including those by PACs. And it calls for the registry to develop an electronic filing system for reports required during this 10-day period. Locals may develop electronic filing system, but also requires county election commissions to post these reports, whether they have electronic or not. And these reports are due by the close of the business next day. And like I said, the $2,500 covers contributions and expenditures. Section 20, penalties. Originally only listed candidates, the TCA. We changed this to read, a civil penalty is authorized by this section and levied against a PAC that named or certified one or more candidates as a treasurer or officer at the time the offense occurred. and this is or was constructively controlled or directed by one or more candidates in the commission of an offense. And these people are personally liable for the penalty. It cannot be paid using funds from a political campaign committee or PAC. It takes away that ability to do that. That's Section 20. Section 21 requires all PACs and candidates to keep their campaign and PAC monies in a separate, segregated, and designated bank account and prohibits commingling of these funds with personal, business, or other funds. That's a new requirement. Previously, this was an administrative rule, and the registry could not level fines for infractions of this rule. Section 22. This section requires 501c4s, nonprofit entities who engage in paid political communications within 60 days of election for state or local offices to register as a PAC. Currently, law, including federal campaign finance law, allows 501c4 entities to raise and spend unlimited amount of monies without any disclosure of the sources of that money or exactly on or what or how that money was spent. These expenditures often take the form of communications that contain the name or likeness of candidates, but are not deemed especially to expressly advocate for their election or defeat. So long as the C4 entities do not include any electioneering language such as vote for or vote against, oppose, or support in their communications or expenditures, they do not have to register as a PAC. This will change under this requirement. Without these triggering words, such language is considered public education. Rather than to seek influence election outcome, they are not subject currently to disclosure under campaign finance laws. This section would essentially redefine the thresholds for state and local PAC disclosures away from the electioneering language standard and instead set a new standard as the state and local only candidate's name or visual likeness contained within a paid communication if the communication or expenditure is made within 60 days of when the candidate is set to appear on the ballot, and if the total amount spent for such expenditure exceeds $5,000. This provision only applies to C4 entities spending on state or local candidates and would only require C4 entities to register as a PAC with the state or county, not the Federal Election Commission. Section 23, Registry of Election Finance. We're changing some things here. Currently, the registry is composed of 6 members, with 1 Democrat and 1 Republican being appointed by the governor, House, and Senate. The terms are 5 years, and there's no limit to the number of terms any registry member can be appointed or serve. This legislation is required to prevent holdover appointments. We have 1 person who is serving 7 years past his last appointment. Code is amended by stating the following. A registry member must not consecutively serve more than 1 full term. This will apply to terms being served upon the effective date of this act. Vacancies can be filled in the same manner as the vacating member's office was originally filled. It also designates the Speaker of the Senate and Speaker of the House as the appointing authorities in consultation with each caucus. To resolve constitutional issues and challenges in accordance with an AG opinion, where we prohibit registry family members serving as employees of the state, participating in any election campaign or lobbying, or employed as a lobbyist is no longer a requirement. Registry members of the registry must not serve for 1 year after their removal, vacancy, or termination of the term of office as a state or local office official, employee, or any political subdivision of the state. In other words, this stops the revolving door for 1 year after they complete their term. They cannot serve as an officer of any political party or PAC, make contributions, participate in any election campaign, lobby, or employed as a lobbyist, and be employed by any elected office holder. Section 26, to resolve constitutional issues and challenges in accordance with AG opinion, prohibition is removed for the Ethics Commission family member serving as an employee of the state or participate in any way in an election campaign. Note, Election Commission regulates the PACs. That's why we did not remove that requirement. Section 27 increases items required to be retained by candidates, members, and PACs. In order to comply with an audit, candidates and PACs and campaigns shall retain copies of all, and we added more on this, all checks, money orders, wire or account transfers, withdrawal statements, credit or debit statements, bank statements, vendor receipts, and other documentation directly resulting from a financial transaction involving the receipt or disbursement of any funds subject to disclosure for 2 years. from the date of the election to which the records refer. Sections 28 to 33 involves consulting and campaign services. I want to note right now, TCA Section 210-123 makes it a crime for a member or members-elect of the General Assembly, governor, member of the governor's staff, comptroller, or secretary of the state treasurer to receive a consulting fee. That generally is considered bribery in many circumstances. What we're doing, we're going to define the difference between consulting and campaign services. Section 28 of the TCA is amended by adding the language or campaign services immediately following the language consulting services, wherever it may appear. First, if a person or entity contracts to pay a member of the General Assembly, now this is to pay a member of the General Assembly, a fee, commission, or other form of compensation, including in-kind compensation for the provision of campaign services, the person or entity shall make the disclosures required under the subdivision with respect for campaign services provided. Also, next section, as used in this section, campaign services means services to advise, assist a candidate, political campaign committee, affiliated political campaign committee, or multi-candidate political campaign committee in affecting the results of an election, including without limitation campaign work, paper and electronic advertising, producing mailers and flyers, and distribution thereof. Section 29 increases the penalty for this from a Class C to a Class A misdemeanor to knowingly fail, again, to knowingly fail to disclose a disclosure or provide false, incomplete, or misleading information on a disclosure form. Section 30 is amended by adding the language campaign services immediately following the language of consulting services for members of the General Assembly who contracts to receive a fee, commission, or other form of compensation, including in-kind compensation for the provision of campaign services to a person or entity the candidate or member shall make disclosures required with respect to campaign services provided. Also, if a candidate for one or more member of the General Assembly contracts to pay, and again, a candidate for or member of the General Assembly contracts to pay a person or entity or fee, commission, or other form of compensation, including in-kind compensation for provisions of campaign services, the candidate or member shall make disclosures required under the provisions. Again, we do not want to take away, some members have a business providing campaign services. We wanted to be able to allow them to do that, but just ensure disclosure of those activities and who they deal with. Section 31 includes from a Class C to a Class A misdemeanor to knowingly fail to disclose or provide false, incomplete, or misleading information on the disclosure form. Section 32 applies to staff persons or employees of the General Assembly, adds in-kind compensation and reporting requirements. So in addition to other things they must report, it adds in-kind contributions. Section 33, for the purposes of reporting consulting and campaign service fees to any staff person or employee of the General Assembly, it spans requirements to ensure third parties are captured. And it's amended in by deleting the subdivision of that. And it adds to the person to whom a fee was paid and substituting the following. The person to whom a fee was paid, including the full names, identities of businesses, corporations, individuals, other private entities through which payment flowed or to or from the person making the disclosure. So if we have a staff person providing campaign services or an employee of the General Assembly, they're going to have to report that and who they do business with. Section 34 adds cabinet members to the list of persons who cannot take consulting services. If you recall, we had a cabinet member receiving nearly $8,000 a month consulting services. Cabinet members were not on the list of people who could receive that money. This merely adds cabinet members to that list. Section 35, the TCA is amended by adding the following new subdivisions. In addition to disclosures currently required, each candidate or member of the General Assembly, the governor, officers of the governor's cabinet, cabinet-level staff members, member of the registry, finance, members of the Tennessee Ethics Commission, Secretary of State, Comptroller of the Treasury, State Treasurer, and members of the State Election Commission must also report private income from a single source that exceeds $25,000 in a 12-month period immediately preceding the initial or annual filing requirements for that office holder. This disclosure requires the specific identity of each source of compensation, including to, but not limited to, clients and customers, and a brief description of the nature of the duties performed. It does not include the amount of money. What this does is, if you have a consulting business or some other kind of business on the side, in addition to your current, you're required to disclose who you are doing business with. It does not, there are certain exceptions to this for like doctors and lawyers and privileged information. Let's see here. Also requires disclosure by any member of the General Assembly or candidate for the General Assembly the name of multi-candidate political action committees established and controlled by the member or candidate within the immediately preceding 5 years of the date of disclosure. In other words, who runs these leadership PACs must be disclosed. This disclosure must be made annually beginning with the candidate or official's next statement. Section 36 merely adds under penalty of perjury to our disclosure statements that we do each year. Section 37 covers the effective dates. That's a quick summary. Are there any questions?
Representative Williams, Chairman Williams, you had a question.
I have a question in the department question. This amendment rewrites the bill in its entirety, so should we adopt it and discuss it, or what would the chairman prefer?
We've already adopted it because he had a caption.
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry. Okay. Chairman Whitson, thank you for bringing this bill. I really, obviously, it's a lengthy bill, but I do think that there are three components really of the bill that I think are very important for us to discuss, and that is clearly defining what things that people can do with their campaign accounts. I think it's really, and where people can acquire money as it relates to their campaign accounts. And I know this is a really long bill, but I'm excited about it because I really think at the end of the day, it brings a new level of accountability. I would consider this a rewrite or an update based upon today's way of campaigning and campaign finance reports. And so I really want to thank you for doing that. I look forward to supporting it. I guess the one of the questions that I had as it related to it is, why do you have to have different effective dates? Is it because of I know certain sections of it have an effective date and then another section has effective dates. That has to do with the actual election period for the filing of these reports?
Yes, and also when it's effective, yes, on the dates of the reports are required and the date of the elections.
Okay.
And we broke that down by sections when these reports are due.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. As a follow-up, this talks about a lot about how a campaign or political action committee can receive revenue, but I didn't see anywhere as it relates to political campaigns or PACs that has changed much about the expenditures or what they can expend money on. Is that correct, or did I miss it?
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, expenditures are required for PACs to disclose.
Representative Williams.
I guess maybe let me rephrase the question and be, currently we are saying in our PACs, what we are spending the money on and who we're spending the money with, much like we would do a regular campaign finance. The question is the types of things we can spend them on, like meals, travel, lodging. None of that has changed in this bill based upon what I've read. Is that correct?
That's, Mr. Chairman?
Chairman.
Yeah, that is
Chairman Woodson.
correct. It does not prohibit or add additional what cannot be spent or adds anything new that can be spent on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you repeat what you just said? No, I'm kidding with you, Mr. Chairman. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I appreciate the legislation. I do appreciate it. But I guess what I was trying to comprehend, because I just took my online ethics report today, actually, and I was trying to comprehend as you were reading, does this really change other than, I know you strengthen the laws, and I think Chairman Williams said that you're updating it in a way where, as to how we do business today, but does it really put any more burden on us if we report right than what we're doing now? And I hope that's a fair question.
Chairman Whitson.
It does not. It just requires, except for the itemized expenditures and contributions, you're going to have to disclose all of those, anything under $100. It requires that. And it's, and for several folks, I think for most folks, that will not be a burden, that amount of money that we're talking about. It does not, and as Chairman Williams said, it does not prohibit more of the things that we spend on right now, or the contributions. The contributions limits will still stay the same, but it's just more disclosure, for the those who work for the General Assembly or who contracts with the General Assembly to provide campaign services. If we hire somebody to do our campaign services, it requires more disclosure in that regard.
Chairman, Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be through. Then basically, I think that's what I already do. I was just trying to figure out if it was going to change the way, but I think that's basically what we always do, because I always take that campaign money very serious. So I think reporting it is just important if you can report it, period.
Chairman Whitson.
For instance, under the booklet that we were given by the Registry of Election Finance, it strongly recommends that you basically retain copies of your checks and make copies of those that you receive. This puts it more teeth into that now I'm going to have to start scanning all those checks and keep a copy of it.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple different questions. One being, anywhere in this amendment or bill now, does it affect where we had the prior relationships or anything like that? Doesn't say anything about that.
Chairman Whitson.
That is not the intent. Could you define that better, Mr. Chairman?
Well, a prime example is I have a friend of mine who I've known since he was in diapers, who's a lobbyist here, and if we want to go out and eat or something, there's nothing wrong with me buying his meal or him buying my meal, since we've been grown up together.
Chairman Whitson.
Mr. Chairman, that is not the intent of this legislation. If I could ask legal to confirm that this legislation does not touch that section of the code.
Well, let's not take the time right now. I can get that answer and come back to that. My other question would be, again, I'm a small business owner. I own a printing company. I am a member of the General Assembly. If someone comes to me and says, hey, I would like for you to print me up 1,000 flyers to mail out to people in my district, is that something that I'm going to have to list on my disclosure that I did work for them? And if it's, say, another member of the General Assembly, will they have to list that on their disclosure as well?
That's a good question. And the intent is not, as you as a businessman with your business partners or your services, is not, if that's a normal part of your business. And again, I would like to make legal clarify that that's not the intent of this legislation or a requirement.
I had, and followed up before we go to legal, I had one similar question. It's my understanding in the bill that anyone who is consulting for a candidate where they don't now will also have to report their work, about the work they did for the candidate. Chairman Whitson.
Are you providing what you would consider campaign services where you receive a fee or pay them a fee for campaign services?
Yes.
Then that would be required to be disclosed.
Currently, they don't have to, but they'd have to start like a PAC.
Let me ask the clarification. I want to be sure I got that.
Excuse me.
One more
Chairman
question.
Crawford, one more
Yes,
question.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we go out of session, because it may need to be addressed there as well. The way I kind of read this, and I may be interpreting it completely wrong, but let's say let's say I have something that I have put together, a letter or whatever, and I go to, let's say, Chairman Holtzclaw, and I say, Chairman Holtzclaw, this is what I'm thinking about doing, sending out as a survey to my constituents. And I show it to him, and he says, well, I think maybe this picture would look better here, and you need to move this here. There's no money transpired. It's just verbal talk. Would that be considered something we would have to file on the disclosure as an in-kind contribution?
Chairman Whitson.
That is, again, not the intent of this legislation, but I would like to, again, go back to make sure we did not, and I appreciate this discussion. These are some of the questions that we probably did not anticipate, but I just want to be clear on it before we leave here out of this committee today. But I would like to make sure that those activities and connections are not burdensome, and we really are, what we're looking at is those who contract or receive fees to provide campaign services.
Thank you. Thank you,
Any
Mr.
objections? We'll go out of session to ask legal. Any questions? We've got about four or five questions. We are going out of session to ask legal to answer these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug Garrett with the Office of Legal Services. And I'm reading from Section 210-125 that you must disclose the following to the Ethics Commission: the person to whom the fee was paid, the position of the person to whom, excuse me. The person to whom the fee was paid, the position of the person to whom the fee was paid, the amount of the fee, the date the services were rendered, and a general description of those services rendered.
Chairman Woodson.
So as as asked by Chairman Crawford, they would have to disclose that.
Correct. I think the intent is not to prohibit the activity of engaging in campaign services by providing mailers or advertisements or flyers. It's just to require the disclosure of this information in a similar manner that they do consulting services that other executive officials and so forth can engage in.
That's Matt Mundy, Legal Services. We had a couple other, Chairman Crawford, there was a couple other questions that Chairman Whitson wanted legal to answer. Do you recall what those were?
Yeah, the other one that I would be interested in would be if there is no money or no service that has transpired, it's just, I guess, consulting back and forth. If no money is transpired, would that have to be listed as an in-kind contribution?
It depends. An in-kind contribution is the transfer of something of value that's not monetary. So if you, for instance, were a professional consultant and you gave some political advice in your capacity as a professional consultant, I think you have to disclose that already under existing laws, an in-kind contribution. And I don't think this bill changes that.
Chairman Whitson.
I just want, Chairman Crawford, does that answer your question?
It does to an extent. I guess the follow-up with that would be if this happens between two General Assembly members, say me and the example I'll give earlier as Representative Holtzclaw, he's not a professional consultant. I'm not a professional consultant, although I own a printing company. Would we both have to report that on our disclosures?
Well, it may be illegal.
Yes.
Matt Bundy.
If I understand you correctly, you're just talking about conversations between you and Representative Holtzclaw. I do not believe you'd have to report that under this bill.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Shaw, you had a legal question?
I do, and Vice Chairman just brought it to my attention. Occasionally, we might do in broadcast business some advertisement for the state. Would I have to report that?
Chairman Whitson.
Is that during a campaign or just
No, sir. It just could be any time of the year. It might be the COVID-19, and maybe they're trying to get some information out about what you should do, where you should go to get vaccines and all those type things. How would this bill affect me doing business with the state as such?
Chairman Whitson.
My understanding, only if it exceeds $25,000 in that 1 year period, that it would be required to be reported.
Okay, that makes sense.
Representative Shaw.
Oh, you're just,
One other quick follow-up, it might be that I'm representing 5, 6 different radio stations. But if it exceeded $25,000 more, I would still have to make a report, it.
not if it's different entities like that, if it's paid to those radio stations. What we're intent of this legislation is those who have a business and they receive compensation from vendors and such, or they provide services and they're paid $25,000 or more, they have to list just the vendor that they receive that money from. They don't have to list the amount.
Thank you.
Representative Williams, you had a question for legal? No. Okay. Any other questions for legal?
Oh, not for legal. I was going, while we're out of session.
Okay.
Chairman Crawford, one question I asked, and I was assured it did not have to be done. Let's say, for instance, as a candidate, I have a local printer, and I go to him. He prints my mailers. That printer is not required to provide a disclosure report on that, me hiring him to do my mailer, since it's,
Well, other than being a little disappointed you took it to somebody else, I guess that's okay.
I will,
Chairman Whitson.
they can vote for me.
I had one question for you and legal. I believe legal's answered it, but you said in your statement that when you leave for that year, you can't serve. You had stated you can't serve as chair of a political party. Did you mean political party or political PAC, or is either?
Let me go back to that, and I'll read it exactly what I have there, Mr. Chairman.
Section 26, 27?
Yes. It was, are you talking about members of the registry?
Well, you had said that you just made the statement that for that 1 year they can't serve as chairman of a political party.
Okay. Let me read it,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. Registry members must not serve for 1 year after the removal, vacancy, or termination of the term of office as a state or local elected office, employee of any political subdivision of the state, officer of any political party or PAC, make campaign contributions, participate in any election campaign, lobby or be employed as a lobbyist, and be employed by any elected office holder. So I could not come and work for you, Chairman Rudd, when I leave for 1 year.
All right.
If I was on the registry.
Another, I had a question as trying to make notes on all this. You've got a complex bill here. One about confidentiality. It doesn't really describe in the law or the bill. In other words, let's say that you have a member that's a political consultant, and they have confidentiality agreements with their subcontractors that they can't disclose who they are. Would they have to break that confidentiality agreement under this law? Because as the law states right now, if you're paying a consultant, they have to, as I understand it, the bill is written, they would have to disclose, like if you're paying a consultant $20,000 to handle the mail, they would also have to disclose, or the consultant would have to disclose, who the consultant's paying to print and handle the mail house and all that. And they don't, a lot of times due to business, they don't want to express that or disclose that because that lets their competitors know what mail house and what printer they're using. And as long as it's reported, that kind of breaks that possibility of confidentiality because the subcontractors of a consultant don't want to be known, and the consultant doesn't want other consultants to know who they're using. So I was wondering about how far does this have to go?
When I talked about the confidentiality.
And it's a legal question as well.
Well, sure,
Yeah.
but it was under this section where, as Representative Shaw was talking about, if you have a business and you're a lawyer or a doctor and you receive money for a $26,000 surgery, you do not have to disclose that. It's only if in those normal business transactions.
So it would apply under with a consultant to disclose, or the candidate to disclose who the subcontractors are.
Yeah, that was discussed under a different section. Let me ask legal to see if it would fall under the additional sections we added.
Thank you, Matt Mundy from legal. I think what you're referring to is if you didn't have a non-disclosure agreement that's recognized by law,
Yes.
then you would have to disclose. But if you have an NDA in place, then I don't think that you would have to disclose. With respect to an attorney-client privilege, those rules are governed by our rules of professional responsibility. I wouldn't be able to disclose my clientele unless and until, some document was made public, like filing a complaint or something like that was a public record. With respect to physicians and patients, they don't have to, a doctor can't disclose who his patients are under federal law, and unless he was given consent to do so.
So the intent of the bill right now, without a confidentiality, is that if a consultant is helping a candidate, and they, of course, as almost all consultants do, unless they actually own a print shop, they use other vendors to supply the services to the candidate. The candidate's paying the consultant. The candidate, in most cases, don't even know who the vendors are. Right now, that would have to be, without a confidentiality agreement, that would have to be disclosed, wouldn't it? Either by the consultant or the candidate.
I don't want, Matt Mundy from legal, I don't want us to conflate different sections. What we're talking about when we talk about confidential relationships is under the new subdivision in 850-502, dealing with private sources of income in excess of $25,000. So if that's a payment for, if there's a consultant that you, if you provide services or receive services, in excess of $25,000 in that capacity, then you'd have to disclose it unless you had a confidentiality agreement in place.
Okay. Chairman Whitson?
Yeah, the intent is not for members to go out and establish non-disclosure statements with anybody they do business with. And the intent is to capture that expenditures and information for our disclosure reports.
Chairman Williams?
I'm sorry, Chairman, are we in session?
We're out
Are
of
we in
session.
legal, or
We're
are
out
we
of
in a
session.
running
It really
debate?
needs to be the legal to ask questions to clear up anything, or ask
So
Chairman
we're-
Whitson so he can refer to legal.
Okay, so when we come back into session and we have a discussion, I'd like to comment then.
All right. Is there any other questions for legal at this time? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. Any other questions for Chairman Whitson? Chairman Williams?
Thank you. I think, Chairman Whitson, if I'm not correct, the purpose of the disclosure, we have two things. We have a campaign finance report. We have an ethics statement.
Correct.
In the ethics statement, we report who we do business with in excess of $25,000. The purpose of that is to allow people to know where our conflicts of interest are, which is exactly what that statement is for. This bill would further clarify what needs to be put on a conflict of interest statement. If it's an in-kind contribution, by the nature of it being in-kind, it would be less than $25,000, therefore it wouldn't have to be reported. In the instance of you doing business with somebody who's a fellow member, you as a member would have to disclose on your campaign finance report who you spent the money towards and that it was a member. If the member receives those funds from you, they would have to report it on their ethics statement because they received it there. And so all this bill does is create a level of transparency that allows us to better understand that. I also think one of the components of this bill, and I've graciously and excitedly filled out campaign finance reports for 40 of them, I guess now, I have never taken a dollar that I could not itemize. And I think the removal of the $100 or less unitemized receipts is a very important part of this bill. I think it's important. If one of my contributors didn't want their name on my campaign finance report, I didn't take their money. And so I think that's really important part of this, and I support it. But I thought it was important that we communicate the bifurcation between a campaign finance report and an ethics statement and how each would be reported. Thank you.
Chairman Whitson?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Williams. That's exactly the intent of this legislation, is to show the transfer of monies and funds in the election process.
Well, I think there's one thing to distinguish here that we don't currently have to do, and we're bringing people into the system that aren't now, which is consultants. We currently list a consultant or printing company or whoever is managing our campaign or whatever. We list them on candidate disclosures, but they don't have to fill out disclosures. Now they will have to under yours, like say a PAC would. So we're bringing people into having to report to the registry that don't currently have to report, and the things they have to report aren't things candidates are usually concerned with, and that was my main concern, and that's regardless of the 25,000. And also a lot of things that candidates report on their statement of interest, they don't have to report individual like you're talking about. They report the company. It may do multiple things for one company, but they just report the income from a company, not necessarily from everybody that company represents or works with. Chairman Whitson.
And Mr. Chairman, exactly, that's the reason for this requirement is they could have a company, and that company could be receiving. It would be like for me if I had a paving company and I'm receiving $30,000 a year from this paving company or a contractor to do paving work for me, and as chairman of the Transportation Subcommittee, I think that should be reported.
Well, luckily it does. Most of this would not even apply to me. No, I used to do a lot of consulting work because I've never done work for the caucus or for the state since I've been a state rep. And matter of fact, the only time I've ever done work for the state of Tennessee is about 25 years ago. I prepared literature for the 75th anniversary for women's suffrage. And outside of that, I've never done consulting work for the state or the caucus. So have for the party, but not the caucus.
And Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, exactly, and that's why we try to define the difference between consulting and consulting services. So if you wanted to do that work, you're able to do that, just it would be reported.
Well, I do very little. Where I used to do 17 races in a year before I got elected, I don't do hardly any now unless I'm helping somebody get reelected or a local race. I just don't do much anymore because I'm up here. You make people mad by representing one side of your home district or county, so it's best to kind of stay out of it as best you can, unless a close friend's running. Let's see, we have Chairman Wright still want to speak? No. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions on the bill?
Question called on the bill.
We have a question on the bill. Is there any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of the bill say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Chairman votes nay.
Mr. Chairman and committee,
Yes.
Thank you very much. And again, as y'all read through this, if you have questions, please throughout the week, I will appreciate those so we can make sure we're clear as we can be before we get to full committee.
Let's see. Now, we have, thank you, Chairman Whitson.
Thank you.
Also, thank you, as I said earlier, thank you for waiting and granting the other members to go before you. Let's see, we have, and this is going to be somewhat complicated, but I believe we're done. We are, if I'm not mistaken, we're now done with the regular calendar, the final calendar. We are done with the final calendar. We have a special calendar we've got to deal with next, but we are done with the final calendar of this year until the call of the chair. Any objections? All those? We are adjourned on the regular. Now we have a special calendar to address. We have 3 bills on that special calendar. The first is HB 1157 by Stewart, and he had requested that be taken off notice, but due to the rules, it had to go to special calendar. Is there any objections to sending that to the clerk's desk? No objections. We are sending HB 1157 to the clerk's desk. Next up is HB 1486 by Representative Towns. He patiently waited for about 45 minutes. We will roll that to the hill of this calendar. Okay, he is already in another committee meeting. Said to roll that to the clerk's desk. Is any objections? If seeing none, HB 1486 will be rolled to the clerk's desk. Next up will be HB 1158 by Representative Stewart. He also had requested that to be sent to the clerk's desk. Is there any objection to that? Seeing none, HB 1158 by Stewart is sent to the clerk's desk. And that concludes our special calendar. I would like to say thank you for everybody serving. None of us knows what the future holds, but this has been a pleasure, and all of you have been a pleasure. And I've enjoyed serving as Elections and Campaign Finance Subcommittee Chair. And God bless and Godspeed to all of you, and I will be seeing you in the near future. Thank you. We are hereby adjourned as to the call of the chair.